Good evening. My name is Mitz Lee, Board Chair of Asian Pacific American Coalition, also known as APAC. Welcome to APAC 2020 San Diego Mayoral Candidates Forum. I would like to welcome everyone and our mayoral candidates, Assemblymember Todd Gloria and Councilmember Barbara Bree. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This forum will allow our community to get to know our mayoral candidates and hear their plan to improve the quality of life of our community, especially during these uncertain times. Best wishes to all. Please vote on November 3. Remember, our voice and vote matters. Let me introduce Sandy Spackman, our Forum Committee Chair and also APAC Board Vice Chair. She will introduce our moderator for tonight.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Emmy Award-winning anchor and reporter, Marcella Lee from CBS 8 News and the CW San Diego. Welcome, Marcella.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for that introduction. Good evening, everyone. It is such an honor to be your moderator tonight. We want to welcome all of you who are joining us virtually. We are streaming live on cbs8.com, so we do have a broad audience. We hope to make your choice for mayor a little easier after tonight's forum, and we know that your time is very valuable. We thank you for being here with us. Tonight's Mayoral Candidates Forum is presented by APAC, the Asian Pacific American Coalition here in San Diego. APAC is made up of a number of community partners. And before we begin the debate, I'd like to quickly name these partner organizations. Ms. Bree, if you want to turn off your video for a moment so that you don't need to listen to this long list live. I promise that this will take less than a minute. I timed it. But I do feel like it's important for our candidates and our viewers to know the makeup, at least, of a portion of our audience. So we have Alliance of Chinese Americans, Alliance for Quality Education, America's Thai Chamber of Commerce, Asian Culture and Media Alliance, Convoy District Partnership, Council of Philippine American Organizations, Crab Hut, makes me hungry for dinner a little bit, Filipino American Chamber of Commerce Business Network, Filipino American Chamber of Commerce of North San Diego, Japanese American Citizens League, Korean American Coalition, Lao Advocacy Organization of San Diego, Lao American Coalition, Mabuhay Foundation, National Federation of Filipino American Associations, Parents for Quality Education, San Diego Asian Americans for Equality, San Diego Executive Lions Club, and the Vietnamese American Youth Alliance of San Diego. APAC would like to thank all of these community partners for co-hosting tonight's Mayoral Candidates Forum. Now it's time to welcome San Diego City Council Member Barbara Bree and California Assembly Member Todd Gloria. Go ahead, turn on your video to join us. And while you're doing that, I'll do a quick introduction. Barbara Bree is currently Council President Pro Tem, a high-tech entrepreneur. She was elected to the council in 2016, representing District 1, and that's in the northwest part of San Diego, and includes the communities of Carmel Valley, Del Mar Heights, Del Mar Mesa, La Jolla, Pacific Highlands Ranch, Torrey Hills, Torrey Pines, and University City. Todd Gloria is currently a state assembly member, a former San Diego City Council member and interim mayor. He was elected to the state assembly in 2016, representing the 78th district, which includes the Central Coast communities of San Diego, including the cities of Coronado, Del Mar, Imperial Beach, and Solana Beach. Councilmember Bree, Assembly Member Gloria, welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us. Now, I do want to clarify, I reached out to both of you separately about how you prefer to be addressed, and both of you told me you prefer for me to use your first name, so I will honor that request, and I mean no disrespect for not using your titles, but we're going to be here for an hour, so I think Todd and Barbara, Marcella will go by first names, and that'll be great. Let's go over the rules. We will alternate who begins the opening and closing remarks, as well as alternate who answers first when it comes to questions. Each of you will have 2 minutes to answer each question and then 30 seconds for rebuttal. So we'll begin alphabetically with opening remarks. Barbara, you have 2 minutes. My timer is ready and you may begin now.
Right. Good evening. So I'm Barbara Bree and I'm running for mayor. I ran for public office for city council in 2016 because I was frustrated that the street in front of my office had been torn up over and over again to have the same work done. And this was after a career of 30 years in the technology world. I got to City Hall, and quite frankly, I found a culture of no accountability and no transparency. And I stood up to this immediately. As mayor, my priorities are first to ensure equity. I will not tolerate hate and discrimination like we have seen recently and against members of the Asian Pacific Islander community in the wake of COVID-19. Next, I will lead an economic recovery focused on small business, tech, and biotech, which is why I believe my private sector experience creating jobs is so important. My life has been about growing the economic pie. Third, fiscal discipline. No more deals like the 101 Ash Street terrible lease purchase. Next, focusing on homelessness by addressing the root causes. And next, housing. Building housing that working families can afford by making sure that San Diegans stay in control of what gets built in our neighborhoods. And I'm particularly looking forward to the Kearney Mesa Community Plan update, a plan developed by the community. My role model was my mom, Adelaide Bree, a single mom who was divorced and went to work full-time at a job where she was paid less than the comparable men, and there was nothing she could do about it. I became a single mom in 1993 with two daughters, 8 and 11. I was living in a house about to go into foreclosure, and I was fortunate to forge a successful career as an entrepreneur. I believe that the diversity of my life experiences as an entrepreneur, educator, journalist, community volunteer, and founder of 2 organizations that empower women have prepared me to lead our city.
Thank you, Barbara. Todd, we'll get the timer reset and you may begin with your opening remarks now.
Thank you so much, Marcella, and thank you, APAC, for creating this opportunity, and to all of you who are tuning in. We share a love for our city and a desire to see a better future, and I think that's what unites us tonight. My name is Todd Gloria, and I'm running for mayor because as a third-generation San Diegan, I know where our city has been. I grew up in Claremont, graduated from Madison High School, attended the University of San Diego, the first in my family to graduate from college. I'm running for mayor because as the son of a maid and a gardener, I know just how hard it is for working people to make ends meet in a town as expensive as San Diego. My parents taught my brother and I that if we care about something, we're supposed to leave it better than we found it. That turned out to be a recipe for a career in public service. I'm honored to serve on the city council, to represent San Diego in the state legislature, and to serve as the interim mayor of this city. And I believe that I can use those experiences to be an effective mayor going forward. And lastly, I'm running for mayor because I believe that there are many problems facing our city. And Marcella, I'm sure you'll ask us questions about many of them tonight. But broadly speaking, I think our main challenge as a city is that too often we operate like a small town rather than the big city that we are. We are the 8th largest city in the United States, but we have the 5th largest homeless population in the United States. We are spending more than we ever have on this problem, and yet the problem does not seem to be getting better. In fact, it seems to be getting worse. We are a city, a world-class city without a world-class transportation system. If we had met in person, we would have only one option probably to gather up, and that would be by taking our car. I believe a world-class city that meets its climate action plan goals and grows our economy depends on building a robust multimodal transit system that can get us from point A to point B with a variety of good options. And lastly, I think the most pressing issue facing our city is our housing affordability crisis. Increasingly, we're a city where the working and middle class cannot see a future for themselves. We're very adept at building luxury housing, and we do build an amount of low-income housing, but we build next to nothing for hardworking families that don't earn enough to live in that luxury housing, but earn too much to qualify for that low-income housing. I believe that we can embrace the fact that we're the 8th largest city in the United States. We can solve the problems facing our community and tackle these bigger issues like homelessness, infrastructure, and housing affordability. I look forward to discussing more of these ideas with you tonight.
Thank you so much. All right, now to our questions. We asked those who registered for tonight's forum to submit questions about the issues important to them. And the office of mayor, as we know, is nonpartisan, but since both of you are Democrats and share many ideologies, we'd like to focus tonight on what sets you apart from your candidate so that voters can decide. Our first question pertains to the impact of the pandemic on small businesses. Many Asian Pacific Islanders are small business owners who have been economically devastated by the closures and limited reopenings of restaurants, salons, and other professional services. How have you supported Asian businesses in the past? And how does your business roadmap to support existing and prospective business owners differ from your opponents? Todd, let's begin with you. We have 2 minutes and you may begin now.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the question about what you've done in the past, because I think it's the best indicator for what someone would do in the future. When I served on the city council, I led this city to create the Little Saigon district along El Cajon Boulevard, recognizing that that cluster of Asian Pacific Islander owned businesses were a cultural jewel that was worthy of lifting up and to helping to support. I'm proud to have been able to do that and then go to the legislature to make sure that we added signage to actually direct consumers to this cultural gem on El Cajon Boulevard in City Heights. Beyond that, I've worked closely with our Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, of which I'm a member, proud to be the second Filipino elected in California state history to the state legislature, to do things like speak out against the discrimination that we're seeing in the context of COVID and the concerns that some people have about patronizing businesses in the API community. I think broadly speaking, with regard to small business relief, working closely with state regulators to cut red tape, eliminate bureaucracy, to allow things like outdoor dining has been critical to making sure that more of our local small businesses, particularly restaurants, are able to survive during these difficult times. Going forward, what will I do? Well, I would encourage viewers to go to toddgloria.com and take a look at my Back to Work SD plan. This was a plan that I spent 6 months working with over 30 local community leaders, public and private sector leaders, big and small businesses, binational partners, military officials, and others, to try and put out a path for how I, as mayor, would lead us into recovery for all of our community, but including many of our small businesses. And that would be inclusive of things like a buy local program, where we would take cities over $500 million in annual spending and services, supplies, and contracts, and try and concentrate as much of that money locally to stimulate small businesses, to encourage them to keep their doors open and hire more San Diegans who would earn a paycheck and spend that back in our neighborhoods as a form of local economic stimulus. I would recommend the creation of a small business mentorship program, making sure that small businesses that are often independent with language barriers and other challenges to accessing relief programs have another business to help them get through this. I think we can work with our Chamber of Commerce, who has endorsed my campaign, to accomplish that. There are a number of ideas. Again, go to toddgloria.com and download the plan for yourself.
Thank you so much. Barbara, how have you supported Asian businesses in the past? And how does your business roadmap to support existing and prospective business owners differ from your opponents? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I've been a small business owner. I've signed the front of the paycheck, and I understand the responsibility that comes with that. As a council member, I have supported using some of our federal stimulus money to provide direct financial assistance to small businesses. I advocated for providing a share of this to Asian-owned businesses through the Asian Business Association, along with appropriate technical assistance. As a council member, I voted to support allowing businesses to open up outdoors, both restaurants and other kinds of businesses, to allow them, to give them a chance at survival while the pandemic has forced many to be shut down. And as a council member, also my council district has done a weekly newsletter focused on small businesses in our council district, including restaurants, with the goal of getting residents to support our local businesses to help them get through these hard times. As mayor, I will appoint a small business task force to review all of our city regulations to determine which ones are cumbersome and shouldn't be there anymore. As we were voting on an ordinance to allow restaurants to open up outdoors quickly, some restaurant owners shared with me that they'd been trying to do things like this for years and had faced enormous obstacles, fees, etc. at the city. And this is not acceptable because you all pay taxes, you employ people, you are the backbone of our economy. My life has been about growing the economic pie, and I have a broad vision for the future of our city, which comes out of the 30 years I spent in the innovation economy. And this will help all small businesses going forward. It's about growing tech and biotech downtown and in the South Bay. And I've developed a roadmap to recovery, which is on my website, which we worked on with high tech and biotech entrepreneurs, small business owners, and community leaders, which will give you a sense of how I will lead San Diego.
Thank you, Barbara. Todd, 30 seconds, if you'd like to add.
I'd rather get to more questions. I think we're okay. Thanks, Marcella.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Barbara?
Sure.
All right, our next question. This is the second most asked question. by our community members, and it pertains to the police and law enforcement. Both of you have said that you do not support defunding the police, but agree that there needs to be change. As mayor, how will you help build trust between law enforcement and San Diegans? And why is your plan better than your opponents? Barbara, let's begin with you. You have 2 minutes.
So I actually think Todd and I are very, very similar on this issue. We both support Measure B, which is on the ballot right now, which will create an independent police review commission. And that is essential in creating trust between residents and police officers so that if someone is a victim of police abuse, they feel they have a safe place to turn. I think what's important to know is I supported this in 2018 when it was not a popular thing to do, when there were only 4 of us on the council willing to vote to put it on the ballot. So we were 1 vote short. This time around, it was 9-0. It was unanimous. I knew I took a political risk in 2018. I understood that the Police Officers Association would likely not endorse me for a future political run because of this. But I knew it was the right thing to do. And I'm honored that Andrea St. Julian, the author of that measure, who is president of the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association, has endorsed me for mayor. As mayor, I want to get us back to neighborhood policing, where police officers got to know the community and got out of their cars. We're asking police officers to do things they aren't asked to do, meant to do, want to do, or trained to do. And I'm going to look holistically at public safety in terms of who is the right trained professional to respond to a particular call.
Thank you. Todd, would you like me to repeat the question? How will you help build trust between law enforcement and San Diegans? And why is your plan better than your opponents? 2 minutes.
So I do support Measure B, and I would encourage those who are viewing tonight's conversation to vote yes on Measure B. I've committed to, if elected mayor, to fully and faithfully implement that ballot measure. It will come with some significant costs, but Marcella, I believe that those are costs that are worthy of expenditure. I think that it is necessary to show that we're willing to hold officers accountable for bad actions, and that by doing so, we can avoid the kinds of litigation that we see from claims. I don't want San Diego to become a Minneapolis or a Louisville. I want us to be proactive in addressing police officer misconduct and making sure that never happens here. But beyond that, and to your initial point that I don't support defunding the police, I don't do that because necessarily implementing Measure B will increase costs for law enforcement. Another area where I think we can build trust is through additional training for our law enforcement officers, making sure specifically for tonight's conversation that they're well trained to deal with the diverse communities they're asked to protect and to serve. That will certainly come with more costs. I also believe that we should pay our police officers better in the hopes that they can actually afford to live in the communities that they work in. And I think by doing so, we would bridge the divide between law enforcement officers and neighborhoods, thereby boosting the amount of trust that we see for law enforcement. I think beyond that, I want to point out that structural racism that we are having a national conversation about is not just limited to law enforcement. And there are issues of concern in education, in housing, in economic development, and elsewhere. And that's why I've laid out a racial justice platform that's available on my website, again, toddgloria.com. I've understand the complexities of this particular situation, and I've endeavored to lay it out in very specific terms so that folks can look at that plan. And I sincerely hope that people will look at it and provide feedback to me on what we can do. We have to unite as a community to establish what I think should be our goal, which is to be a national leader when it comes to policing in the 21st century. And we should transition the responsibilities that the community no longer feels comfortable having law enforcement do, that quite frankly, they're not comfortable doing, things like mental health calls, homeless outreach, truancy, and other things, transition those to trained professionals in those fields, and then use the savings to make sure that we are a national leader when it comes to policing in 2020.
Thank you, Todd. And we will address in more detail some of those issues that are being affected or are affecting other people. Barbara, would you like your 30 seconds for rebuttal?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to add that I worked with Councilmember Chris Cate on an innovative plan to develop a home buyer assistance plan for police officers who will live in the city of San Diego. It's getting off the ground now with a little bit of city money, which was leveraged with money from philanthropy and from lending institutions. And it's my ability sort of to think in new ways, you know, because of my entrepreneurial background that I think are very important in how I will address public safety and other issues. And also my campaign has released an equity economic development plan, which is on our website.
Todd, would you like to rebuttal or add?
I would just add, this is a difficult subject, but it's one that's worthy of prioritization. I'm grateful that you put this on the agenda tonight, Marcella. What I would say is that I've been grateful in this campaign and throughout my career of being able to bring people together around difficult issues and find common ground and move forward. So when we're discussing our respective plans, when you consider that our police officers are supporting my campaign, as well as Dr. Shirley Weber, Assemblymember Weber, who is the state's leading advocate for police reform, if both individuals groups can endorse my candidacy, they see me as being best suited to be the next mayor of San Diego, then I do believe that we can bring people together and actually make forward progress on building that trust that you asked about and make San Diego a national leader again when it comes to policing.
Thank you, Todd. Again, this debate is streaming on CBS8.com, but is being hosted by the Asian Pacific American Coalition. Asian Pacific Islanders make up about 17% of San Diego County's population, anywhere between 12 and 17% from our latest data. Of course, the new census figures will come out this year. But our third question, which we've touched on a little bit, it has to do with racial equality and discrimination. According to the Stop AAPI Hate Group, Asian Americans have reported more than 2,500 incidents of discrimination nationally, with nearly half of them occurring here in California during the pandemic. And then locally, dozens of incidents of hate crimes have been reported against Asian Pacific Islanders since March of this year. According to the Asian Solidarity Collection, and that is the data that we're using. Now, APAC's coalition members would like to know, how many Asian Pacific Islanders do you have on your staff? And as mayor, how would you protect the API community from xenophobia, prejudice, and hate crimes during this period of COVID and beyond? So Todd, let's begin with you. You have 2 minutes.
Well, so there's 2 questions in there. I've always been proud of having a diverse staff, Marcella, and whether it's in my assembly office or on my campaign, I have a number of staff members who are members of the API community, from Michaela Valk and Pooja Navani, who are Filipino and South Asian, to Koda Zeinzer and Pauline de la Mesa, who are on my campaign team, who are both Japanese and Filipino. I'm proud of the diversity of my campaign staff and my official staff. And I promise as mayor to have an administration that is reflective of the diversity of this city. With regard to hate crimes, again, I would make the point that this is deeply personal to me. If elected, I would be the first person of color elected mayor of this city. And I'm a proud mestizo of Filipino, Native American, Puerto Rican, and Dutch descent. And so as a consequence, this is personal. This is something I would prioritize. And what we must do, and what I would encourage those who are watching, is to report the experiences that you have. I recognize that there is often fear and shame associated with hate crimes, but we must know and we must account for the kinds of crimes that are happening in the community, particularly those right now that because of the national rhetoric coming from our president is actually increasing the level of divisiveness and harm to our community. If you can report this, we can collect the data and then prioritize the funding and the personnel to actually address this. And I think going back to that previous question about taking some responsibilities currently given to law enforcement that perhaps we do not feel comfortable with any longer, that freeing up that time allows them to be able to focus on insidious crimes like hate crimes, which do so much to harm the culture and climate in our community. Again, a way of saying this is personal for me, this is a priority, and we can work together to make sure not just the API community, but every community in San Diego is free of hate crimes, but it starts with reporting. And I really hope that everyone would feel comfortable coming forward and reporting what has happened to them to give us the data to demand change that is necessary.
That was perfect timing. Barbara, how many Asian and Pacific Islanders do you have on your staff? And as mayor, how would you protect the API community from xenophobia, prejudice, and hate crimes during this period of COVID?
I have 1 out of 8 at my city council office, and we have several working on our council, on my mayor's race. So here's what I will say about hate crimes. I'm Jewish, and I have experienced discrimination because I'm Jewish. When I was growing up, the girls were more subtle, but in the neighborhood I grew up in, I had a younger brother. The boys would call him a dirty Jew. And in San Diego, I've actively worked with the Anti-Defamation League, which takes all hate crimes against anybody very, very seriously. And just last week in University City, a rabbi was accosted on Governor Drive. And it was probably by local kids. And it's so sad to see hate crimes happening today in San Diego against many different groups. And in the wake of COVID-19, particularly against Asian Americans. And as mayor, I will stand up against it. It is wrong. Should not be tolerated. And I will work with the Anti-Defamation League and our police officers to make sure that we enforce against any of them. The Anti-Defamation League actually tracks all the local hate crimes. The local chapter does, and then nationally they do it on a national basis. So what Todd says is very important. It is when you are the victim of a hate crime or someone who has been, it must be reported, it must be tracked. It's the only way we can take serious actions to make sure these things don't continue. And the Anti-Defamation League has done excellent programs in the schools. I'm not sure what they're doing now during the pandemic, but historically they've done great programming in the schools. To make sure that kids growing up understand, that hate crimes are not acceptable, and learning about each other is the best way to go.
Todd, do you have a rebuttal?
Not a rebuttal, but I would just echo the comments of Councilmember Bree that the ADL is a phenomenal resource. We have a very strong office here locally led by Tammy and her team. That's a great resource for folks who may have been a victim of a hate crime. Feel free that you can call law enforcement or you can call the ADL. You will find trained professionals that can work with you to make sure that that is properly reported and acted upon.
Barbara?
No, that's good.
Okay, I do want to ask, I've been monitoring some questions that are coming in, and I feel like this is a good time to ask. Some of our attendees would like to know what your stand is on Proposition 16 and affirmative action. And so since we're talking about race, I feel like I'm just going to ask that question right now. If you'd like to go ahead and take 2 minutes. Let's see, Barbara, you may go first.
Yeah, I am supporting Proposition 16. California is one of only 8 states in the United States that does not allow race or gender to be among the factors considered when giving out government contracts or in education. A troubling report came out of Citigroup a few weeks ago, and they looked at racism in our country. And they found that because we've denied equal access to education, housing, and investment capital and businesses to Black Americans, it's actually cost the whole United States several $1 trillion. So my life has been about growing the pie, not fighting over the pie that might be 10 by 10 now, but growing the pie so that it's 20 by 20. And I think that Proposition 16 will allow us to grow the pie for all of us.
Okay, Todd, would you like to share your stance on Prop 16?
I support and have endorsed Prop 16. I'm proud to be a part of the California Legislative API caucus that has also endorsed this measure. I recognize and acknowledge that this is not, this is a measure that has some different points of view within the API community, but I feel strongly that when you look closely at the experiences of our community, as well as other communities of color and of women since the passage of Prop 209 in 1996, it is undeniable that we have been held back because of the inability to try and take in the totality of our community's diversity and make sure that everyone is able to benefit from the educational and public investment opportunities that there are. While women have been the most impacted by Prop 209, by Prop 209, it is also true that portions of our API community have seen lower admission rates into the CSU and UC system. And I think importantly, means the city cannot necessarily look at businesses like those in the Little Saigon district or in those along Convoy in Kearny Mesa and understand how we can make equitable investments to get back to what I was talking to a moment ago about the structural racism that does exist in other sectors of our society and specifically in economic development. I believe that we have to have a mayor that will continue to advocate to increase the number of seats that are available at our universities so that more of our local children can go to our universities. But we have to take into account that many of our young people do not start in the same place, do not have the same access to education, to resources to be able to advance their educational careers. And again, many of our businesses are shut out from contracting opportunities with organizations like the City of San Diego, the County of San Diego, the State of California. And that means billions of dollars not flowing into many of our neighborhoods in our communities. So it is for all of these reasons that I'm a strong proponent of Prop 16. And I hope that members of the API community will all join me in voting yes on that this November.
All right, just under 6 seconds. You both are doing wonderful and keeping to your time. Is there anything else you wish to add, Barbara or Todd?
No,
okay.
I think
So,
Sean and I agree on this issue.
Todd, thank you. I just, some community members were asking live, so I thought it was important for you to share. All right, so that segues, Todd, into our next question, which does have to do with education, as you just mentioned. During the pandemic, of course, many parents have been struggling to help their kids. A lot of kids are feeling overwhelmed, facing many challenges with distance learning. As mayor, how would you support our school districts in the city to help bridge that gap when it comes to technology, and perhaps also support the mental health of children, since we don't really know when life is going to return to normal? Let's begin with you, Todd. 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you for putting that on the table. And you heard me mention earlier our Back to Work SD plan that's available on my website. And when you see it, you'll see the first series of recommendations are in the realm of education, because that diverse group of stakeholders that we worked with and the public that we consulted for that report all came to the same conclusion. Our economy cannot reopen until our schools reopen. And we recognize and understand that virtual learning is not a full substitute for in-person instruction. Marcella, as mayor, you will not hear me say that education is not my responsibility. I acknowledge and respect the fact that we have a separately elected school board for which they have the direct jurisdiction. But as mayor, I would see my responsibility as building a great city. And we cannot build a great city without great public education. And so you will see me use the bully pulpit of the mayor's office to make sure that we're getting better results for our schools and for our children. And so in the context of the pandemic, I believe the city can be a better partner to the school district to do the kinds of things that we see happening in private schools currently, which is having access to testing and contact tracing, PPE, and the other kinds of things that are allowing those private schools to be able to reopen safely. And we need to be able to do that for our public schools as well. I would hope to draw upon the relationships and the experience I've had working at the state and federal level to be able to effectuate that. And to your point about both mental health and about online access, I believe the city can play a pivotal role in bridging the digital divide. While many students do have access to this normally, some of our students do not, and they are falling further behind. I would see it as a moral imperative for the city to work with our franchisees, Cox Communications and others, to fill in the gaps where we have homes that are not served by high-speed wireless, high-speed internet connection that are critical for being able to work from home, to do schooling from home. And lastly, Marcella, I deeply appreciate you using the words mental health. The stigma in our society in general and within the API community specifically often means that we will not talk about this. But I know for a fact that long after we've defeated COVID-19, we will be dealing with the echoing effects of mental health issues from anxiety and depression. And we need to have a mayor that's going to prioritize that. You will see me do that specifically by making sure our county is living up to its responsibilities as the jurisdiction that has local responsibility around mental health.
Thank you, Todd. Barbara, as mayor, how would you support school districts in San Diego to help bridge the gap when it comes to technology, and how would you help support the mental health?
So I think Todd made a lot of good points. So I'm going to add on what I would do that comes out of the 30 years that I spent in the innovation economy. First of all, I've been a long time advocate for universal internet access for families and small businesses. Everyone needs it today, for learning, for healthcare, for social interaction, for shopping. And the pandemic exemplified the digital divide in our city. And the city can do a better job of negotiating with Cox, Verizon, et cetera, than we have been doing. As a council member, I did vote to allocate $500,000 to bridge the digital divide on a temporary basis for many families. I've also supported the efforts of this new San Diego Parks Foundation, which is installing Wi-Fi at our neighborhood parks. So first, internet access. Second, we need more childcare. And we need to review the existing regulations that hinder many families from opening a childcare business in their homes. Perhaps set up a small fund. I think we can leverage philanthropy to allow families who want to start childcare businesses to get access to capital they may need to make improvements in their homes. And third, as I said, I come out of the innovation economy, which creates the high-paying jobs and good service sector jobs around it. And this world is moving downtown in a big way with the revitalization of Horton Plaza and the recent purchase of the Manchester complex by a new real estate investment trust, and they're going to create a massive biotech center. That's why my office will include a school engagement coordinator who will establish structured relationships with schools so that and employers with a focus on STEM, but other things, it could be the Old Globe Theater, the City of San Diego, the Navy, all sorts of employers, so that from a young age, children understand the job opportunities that are available to them. And as they get older, they get access to paid internships.
Look at that. It's like you both have timers on your end as well. Todd, would you like to make a rebuttal?
We just have a lot of practice doing this. We do this multiple times a week. I just want to add, and going back to sort of my intro about, small town, big city approach, I would point out that in terms of bridging the digital divide, cities like Chicago have long addressed this issue through leadership in their mayor's office, working with partners to identify the students without access to the internet, and using those relationships to bridge that gap. When it comes to summer youth employment, the city's commitment is roughly $250,000 annually. But you compare that to peer cities like Washington, D.C., where they spend, I believe, more than $8 million annually. You see how we have been underperforming when it comes to our students, and how we can do better simply by doing what other cities are already doing, and then hopefully innovating and improving beyond them.
Barbara, would you like to add?
Well, all I'll say is, I'm running for mayor because I've seen the limits of what a council member can do. And the council member can't negotiate with carriers, with Verizon, with Cox. I've met with them all in my office, and they don't want to budge right now. Well, they budged during the pandemic, but I met with them a year and 2 years ago to ask them what are they doing to provide more families with internet access. And they told me about, well, if a family has a child in the school lunch program, but not everybody has a child. What if you're older? What if you're younger and you don't have children yet and you can't afford internet access? So I found their answers very lacking, and I did not have the bully pulpit or the authority to, make sure that, everyone gets access to the internet. So as mayor, I will have that authority and I will use it.
Yeah. All right. So our next question has to do with homelessness, which I know both of you have spoken extensively about. There is a community member watching right now. His name is Daniel, and I just wanted to give you this feedback from the community before I ask the question. He asks, do these candidates even understand what it's like to be poor? So my question is, what is your plan to help those who are homeless, and specifically address, again, mental health needs, but also those who are struggling and maybe just a paycheck or two away from being homeless? And Barbara, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So Daniel, thank you for your question. There is no one size fits all. People become homeless for different reasons. Sadly, a growing number are becoming homeless due to mental health and substance abuse. For some families, it's simply they lost their job and they need help getting another job, and they need a loan or a small grant to tide them over until they get that new position. So what we need is truly a seamless system, which is not what we have today. A few months ago, I was walking, it was actually March 3rd, I was in a busy street corner in the southern part of the city, and a gentleman walked up to me and he said, "I'm homeless, I want help." He told me his story. He had lost his job a year ago. His wife had left him. He was living with his sister. He'd been drinking too much, and he acknowledged he had had violent outbursts, and his sister had literally dropped him off a mile away. I called 211 San Diego expecting I would find a shelter bed for him, and instead I was put on hold and transferred here or there and given a list of places to call. This is unacceptable. I did call the Alpha Project, and they took him in, and he is getting the help that he needs. First of all, as mayor, I'm going to make sure we have one phone number you can call when you're homeless and you want help, or you're a small business owner and you see someone on the street who needs help. And I will make sure that the people, the organizations we give money to are responsible for delivering results. What I won't do is make an empty promise. When my opponent, when Todd was sworn in for a second term on the city council in 2012, he promised to end chronic homelessness downtown. And instead, it more than doubled in his last 4 years on the council. And this is data from the Downtown Partnership, which tracks the numbers every month. When he was sworn in for a second term, there were about 600 homeless, unsheltered people downtown. And when he left 4 years later, there were more than 1,200. Father Joe blames Todd for a lot of this happening on Todd's watch. And that's why I'm honored that Father Joe is supporting me for mayor.
Thank you, Barbara. Todd, I mentioned Daniel's question, do the candidates understand what it's like being poor? My question specifically is, what is your plan to help those who are homeless, specifically addressing the mental health needs and also addressing those who may just be one paycheck away from being homeless? You may begin 2 minutes.
Marcella, I absolutely do understand. This was how I was raised in our community. There were periods of time where we didn't have a car, we struggled to make the rent. And this is what's motivated my career that's been focused on trying to help more people make ends meet in San Diego. You've seen me lead the city's efforts to raise the minimum wage, provide paid sick days, to expand the amount of affordable housing in the community, and to ensure that we have better mass transit. This is all derived because I very much understand it, I think more so than others in this race. I think particularly when you consider the fact that there are cities across this nation that are ending chronic homelessness, and the fact that our city is spending more than it ever has, but it's not seeing the results those other communities have, you can understand that we have a lot of room for improvement. And I want to point out a couple of things I think we could do. You need strong executive leadership. In cities that are seeing transformational change, the mayor is deeply and personally involved. They're not a Johnny-come-lately who just recently met a homeless person 6 months ago. They've been in this fight for years and years and make it a priority. I will do that. Importantly, data and transparency. If you're spending that kind of money but not seeing results, clearly we are not holding providers accountable, and we must demand that they open up their books, show that they can get people off the streets and keep them off the streets, and that's how we should make our funding decisions. Importantly, we need a better relationship with the County of San Diego. Their services plus our housing is how you end homelessness. Honored to have the endorsement of County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, because he knows that I'm the candidate he can work with to build that relationship that will get people off the streets. I believe we have to work with the other cities in our county. Roughly 1/3 of our homeless are in the smaller cities in our community. We must coordinate our responses to make sure that what we do in the city of San Diego is mirrored and leveraged in cities like Chula Vista, National City, El Cajon, et cetera. And then we have to build more housing. While many people want to demonize and criminalize the homeless, I understand that by our recent homeless count, roughly half of the individuals are there because they are poor. They are seniors on fixed incomes. They're veterans whose benefits don't go far enough. They are low-wage workers who are living in their cars. So my support for additional housing is critical, because you can have one phone number, but if you don't have a place for them to live, they're simply going to be put on hold. That will not be acceptable in my administration.
Barbara, would you like to expand or give a rebuttal?
I'll just add that the convention center, which has been a very good city-county collaboration during the pandemic, as a place to house homeless individuals and get them the support they need, is a very positive step forward with the city and the county working much more effectively together.
Todd, any last words?
I would agree with that. I'm proud to have been able to find millions of dollars at the state to fund that particular effort. I think it needs to continue through the calendar year. The fact that the city was considering closing that basically tomorrow, I think would have been a disaster and a mistake. And I think it's emblematic of the short-sighted nature of the current leadership at City Hall that, again, is not getting us the results that we want at a time when we're spending more than we ever have. Believe me, we have a homelessness crisis. It's time we put a homelessness advocate in the mayor's office.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with affordable housing, but in particularly, someone from the community asks, as mayor, will you build affordable housing only in lower income communities of color, or will you support bringing solutions to all areas of San Diego? And then in parentheses, the person wrote, NIMBY, will that just be in communities of color? So Todd, you may begin, 2 minutes.
Sure. No, with the city, I believe in a balanced community strategy, and that's actually been a city ordinance for a very long time. But of course, we don't always live up to that ordinance. And in many cases, we fall far short of it. I would point out that of our city's 9 city council districts, 7 of them actually do have permanent supportive housing. This is the kind of housing that gets homeless people off the streets and keeps them off the streets. Regrettably, 2 of those council districts have none in their districts, and one of them belongs to my opponent. And it's that lack of leadership, that lack of willingness to walk the walk, to be a part of the solution, is precisely why our problems are getting worse. And Marcella, this isn't simply about the lowest rung of housing ladder in terms of those housing for the very poor and the most vulnerable, but this is also about housing for working and middle-class San Diegans. You know, in the last 10 years, the city has permitted just 33 units of housing for working and middle-class San Diegans. 33 units in 10 years. That is why so many of your viewers right now, folks who have good paying jobs, who've done everything right, but cannot manage to be able to afford the rent or cannot foresee being able to buy a home in the city, it's a fact that the city is simply not building enough housing. We're building a lot of luxury housing, but not nearly enough for the middle class. And we have to have a mayor that is not going to take a NIMBY mentality, but is going to say that if every community takes its fair share, no one neighborhood will be radically changed. But Marcella, yes, every community must do its part. And I did that as a city council member where I helped to cite all kinds of housing in my city council district. Those neighborhoods are better because of it. And I refuse to see new housing as being necessarily bad for the community. I believe in many cases it can help uplift a community and make it better.
Thank you, Todd. Barbara, affordable housing. As mayor, will you build affordable housing only in lower income communities of color? And this is a question directly from a participant. Or will you support bringing solutions to all areas of San Diego?
Yes. So first, in my city council district, the areas where the most new construction is happening is Pacific Highlands Ranch, which is the eastern part of Carmel Valley, and University City in the northern part. And in Pacific Highlands Ranch, 20% of all the new housing units are affordable. And in University City, as they're building new housing units, 10% are affordable. So here's an honest policy difference between Todd and me. He has supported state legislation that would eliminate single family zoning, and he has supported state legislation that would take away local control of land use. I want San Diegans to be able to be in control of what gets built in their communities. And just a few weeks ago, the city council unanimously approved the 3 Roots project in Mira Mesa. A great project with 1,800 homes at all different price points. And it was unanimously approved by the Mira Mesa Planning Group, which spent a number of years working with the developer to get the community benefits it deserved in exchange for accepting the increased density. And this is San Diegans controlling San Diego. And I'm looking forward to the Kearny Mesa community plan update, which will be the same, because updating community plans with appropriate density is one of the ways we can provide more affordable housing. Because when we do this, we need to ask developers, since we're going to give them the right by right to build more, we can ask for something in exchange, which is what we did when I voted to update the Morena Boulevard plan. We asked that 15% of all the new units in that area be affordable for working families, up to 100% of median. That's firefighters, police officers, librarians, school teachers who earn too much to qualify for subsidized housing, but it's challenging for them to live in San Diego. So here's 5 things I will do. Number 1, I will streamline development services. Time is money. Second, the pandemic's going to offer the opportunity for adaptive reuse of office and commercial space as housing. This is much less expensive than building new. It can be both for sale and rental. Third, I will enforce our existing laws against short-term rentals. That's 16,000 housing units
Barbara,
that will be back on the market.
Why don't we use some of your time in the rebuttal and you can finish your
Thank you.
points. But Todd, I saw you shaking your head, so I'm sure you would like your 30 seconds for your rebuttal, and you can begin now.
You know, so let me be clear. We are in a housing crisis. I don't support eliminating any kind of housing. We need more kind of housing. And so what was stated a moment ago is not true. But if you peel back all the rhetoric that was just in there, Marcella, the question that was asked, my opponent is making clear that she is not in agreement with that, because she's willing to put more housing in the Midway area, in the Morena area, in Kearny Mesa, and in Mira Mesa. But those are not the communities she represents. And she did not dispute the fact that she does 0 amount of permanent supportive housing in her city council district. If every community is not helping to solve the problem, we will not solve this problem. I'm someone who will be a mayor who will solve real problems in our city.
Barbara, go ahead and.
So I will say, when every council member was asked to submit sites for permanent supportive housing in their council district. I submitted sites I felt were perfectly appropriate. The mayor's office didn't like them. So not my fault. The mayor's office didn't like the perfectly appropriate sites we submitted. And my council district does include affordable housing in areas where new housing is getting built.
You still have time. Do you want to say your fourth?
So I'll just say the last thing I want to do is a first time home buyer program to provide down payment assistance, similar to what we did for police officers. I think it is so important to try to get people into home ownership.
Let me ask you, we have about 10 more minutes left and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I've had a few people ask, and I know we're talking about the Midway District, so it might be appropriate, about your stance on Measure E. Let's just, since we're going to wrap up and we've been talking about that, what is your position on Measure E, the 30-foot height limit and eliminating that? Barbara,
Okay.
you may go.
So I am voting no on Measure E. A few years ago, the city updated the Midway Community Plan. That would have been the time to discuss it. There is other development that's going to take place near there on the old Federal Post Office site and the Navwar site. And I think all of that development should be considered holistically. Second, I was told during the process of Measure E getting put on the ballot that the zoning would revert to what it was before. I think it was then Prop D passed in the 70s, setting the 30-foot height limit. And I think there should have been rules about what's going to be able to be built there, because otherwise what you're doing is you're just giving a windfall to the current property owners in that area without getting anything back for the community.
Todd, your position on Measure E?
So I support Measure E, and I would ask those who are watching to vote for it this November. This is a project, this is a ballot measure that is supported by the community it impacts. The quintessential example of local control. The local residents and business owners in the Midway community are asking all the other neighborhoods in San Diego to support them and their vision for their own community by voting yes on Measure E. And was mentioned about windfall for the property owners. Well, San Diego, taxpayers of San Diego own the sports arena site. And that is going to necessarily help us find a new way to have a sports arena and actually generate more money for our city, money that can be used to be invested in neighborhood services, things like library hours and road repair and firefighters. Listen, the existing Chili's restaurant lease that's on that site, I'm sure it brings back a little bit of money for the city, but Marcella, we can do so much better. And because we own that land, we can build more housing that's affordable to teachers and grocery store workers and office workers and the folks who need a fighting chance to live in the city. We can address the traffic concerns in that community. And importantly, we should demand high level of design. If the voters vote yes on this, the next mayor of San Diego is going to be able to figure out this deal. And my commitment to you is that we will make sure that we do right by taxpayers, that we build housing that's affordable for working people, that we address traffic infrastructure issues in the community, and that we have the kind of design that will make you proud. I ask people to follow the request of the community. If this was your own neighborhood and you were asking for support, I suspect that you'd want other neighborhoods to support you. As a consequence, I hope that you'll support the Midway community and allow them to have the destiny that they would like to see for their own neighborhood.
Barbara, would you like to take time for?
I will just say that this impacts the neighboring communities a great deal, and it is a windfall, not just for it is a windfall for the property owners in the immediate area, and we haven't asked them to do something in exchange, which is what we did on the Marina Boulevard Community Plan update.
And Todd?
And I would say that that's up to the next mayor. If approved, the next mayor can work on that. And you've already heard what my deal points would be and how I would hold them accountable. If they can't meet those deal points, we'll reject the deal and we'll find someone who can work with us to get something that is befitting of San Diego.
Thank you both. It is 6:54, and at about 6:55, we were going to allow you to do closing remarks. I felt it important to address the questions that were being asked by the community members. So we didn't get to a couple issues. One of them had to do with the 300 million in projected tax revenue losses for the city and what services you might cut. But I do feel like we need to give you time to make closing remarks. And why don't I just put a minute extra? I'll give you each 3 minutes to say your closing remarks so that if you'd like to address that last question and wrap it in there some way, you can. So I will allow you, Todd, to go first.
Sure. Well, to answer that question, I feel uniquely suited to address the city's current and future economic challenges. For 6 of the 8 years that I served at City Hall, I chaired our city's budget committee. I helped to lead us through the Great Recession and turned 9-figure budget deficits into substantial surpluses and reserves that are going to help get the city through this current financial crisis. We did that the hard way. We had to tighten our belt. We had to work hard and work with our employees to find cost savings, but ultimately we were able to get that job done. Marcella, what I think is troubling is the city was running a $70 million budget deficit before the pandemic hit and before the recession began. I think it's emblematic of taking those surpluses and turning them into deficits that shows you the last 4 years have not been an era of fiscal responsibility at City Hall. And so I'm running to actually restore fiscal sanity to our city. To sum up, I would say that in this campaign, you have an opportunity to make history, to chart a new path for our city, a vision for our city that is big, is bold, and it is inclusive. And I would encourage you to reject a vision for the city that is so narrow and so exclusive that it excludes you and your family. I believe that if you work hard and play by the rules, you should have a place for yourself in this community, in your hometown. I have been able to live the San Diego dream. Two working class parents to be able to buy a home in San Diego, put their 2 kids through college, and I have been able to serve my community, my hometown, the place that I love. I have lived the opportunities that this city can provide people. And I'm running for mayor because I want to make sure those ladders of opportunity continue to exist for people in our community today. I think we recognize and know that our homelessness crisis is unacceptable and that we should join the cities across this nation that are ending chronic homelessness. I believe we recognize the condition of our roads in every neighborhood in the city are unacceptable and can be done better. And I believe I can deliver on that promise of making better roads. And more importantly, and most importantly, is the fact that we have a housing affordability crisis that will not be solved by someone that demonizes the housing issue, utilizes the rhetoric of Donald Trump to scare neighborhoods into believing that housing is necessarily bad for their community, and instead embrace an approach that says if every neighborhood does its fair share, we will be able to accommodate our children and our grandchildren and do it in a way that does not disrupt any single neighborhood. I'm proud to have built a big and broad and diverse coalition of supporters for this campaign, everyone from our firefighters and lifeguards, our teachers and our nurses, the Democratic Party, our Chamber of Commerce, and our labor unions have all lined up behind my candidacy because they know that my word is my bond, that I am able to get results, and that I can get the job done for San Diego. I humbly ask for your vote when you go to the polls this November.
The alarm is about to ring. Thank you so much. Barbara, I'd like you to begin your closing remarks now. And thank you both for being so gracious tonight.
So I wasn't expected to get to the runoff. As you noted at the beginning, Todd and I are both Democrats. First time in San Diego history that 2 Democrats are in the final 2. But it was expected that Todd, since he got the endorsement of the Democratic Party, and Scott Sherman, since he had the endorsement of the Republican Party, that I wouldn't be where I am today. And the special interests in this town across the spectrum have lined up behind my opponent. That's because they are very comfortable with the status quo. They're comfortable with bad deals like 101 Ash Street, which was believe me, a bipartisan, nonpartisan, bad real estate deal for the taxpayers. And so here I am, an independent woman, an independent Democrat who is running a grassroots volunteer-driven campaign based on neighborhood support all over the city, of which I am very, very proud. I have a broad vision for the city. It comes out of my 30 years in the innovation economy. It focuses on creating 2 new employment centers, one downtown for high tech and biotech, and one in Otay Mesa for a biopharmaceutical manufacturing center. It is going to happen downtown with a revitalization of Horton Plaza and the recent purchase of the Manchester complex. It is going to happen faster than I ever would have imagined. And I am the right mayor at this moment in history to sell our city to the world, to make sure our young people growing up have the opportunities to access these good jobs. That is why I think my background is so, so important. And my life has been about coming up with solutions and delivering results. I've been a journalist and a small business owner. I wrote for the Sacramento Bee and the LA Times. I've started 2 organizations that empower women, Athena San Diego and Run Women Run. I've signed the front of a paycheck. I've negotiated profitable business deals. I believe the diversity of my life experiences has prepared me to lead our city at this moment in time. I began tonight by talking about the woman who was my role model, my mother, Adelaide Bree. I'll close by talking about the people who are my inspiration, my children and my grandchildren. I'm married to my husband, Neil. He's my second and last husband, and we each brought 2 children to our marriage. We are blessed to have 3 grandchildren right now, with 4 more on the way between November and March. The last 2 are going to be identical twin boys, being born to my daughter, Rachel, and her husband, Daniel, both school teachers here. Every day that I am mayor, I will be thinking about our children and our grandchildren and how we can make this a better city for them. How do we give them good paying jobs, affordable houses in livable neighborhoods, and streets that are safe and clean? With the right mayor, with a mayor who is not beholden to the special interests who have put well over $1 million into defeating me, we have so many opportunities to make this city work. I'm not looking for my next political job after mayor. This is the culmination of my life's work. I have demonstrated that I have the independence and courage. I would be honored to have your vote.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Bree, Assemblymember Gloria. We appreciate you taking the time to share your vision for San Diego. And for those of you who joined late, we will be posting the entire forum online at cbs8.com, or you can go to facebook.com/APAC-SD. And remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd, less than 3 weeks away. You're being encouraged to vote early this year if you can, through mail-in ballots, through the post office or the drop-off, the official drop-off locations that you can find at sdvote.com. And in-person voting, I just want to remind everyone, is going to take place over 4 days this year to just help with social distancing, starting on Halloween. So it's an easy date to remember, October 31st. And you'll be able to vote Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday in person, but make sure you check your polling sites because most of them have changed. So again, Barbara, Todd, thank you for joining us. And thanks again to APAC San Diego and its community partners for hosting this forum. Again, thanks for your time. We hope you have a wonderful night, everyone, and stay safe.
Great. Thank you, Marcella.
Good evening, everybody.
Bye-bye.